I loved the Penguin. As a massive fan of the Batman, it was exactly the kind of fix I needed while I eagerly anticipate the sequel. It expanded upon the world building, it was darker, it was more violent and twisted, my jaw dropped many a time, and at times it was hilarious too.
You do anything stupid, I'll sense it.
And the cast doesn't have a single weak link. Mark Strong, Shoryag Dashlu, Clancy Brown, Renzi Feliz, Deirdre O'Connell, Francois Chow was there for a hot sec, and of course, Colin Farrell, and the reason why I'm making this video in the first place, Kristen Milioti. With her father now gone, Sofia is determined to rule the seedy underbelly of Gotham by any means necessary. Now let's get into why I love Sofia Falcone. I mean, Gigante. Oh, fuck. There are a ton of things that make Sofia Gigante an incredible character. From her performance, her wardrobe, her makeup, her backstory, she's quickly become one of my favorites. Now I really can't talk about Sofia without praising Kristen Milioti to the moon and back. The way she carries herself, how she uses her body language and hand gestures so tactfully, how a twitch of her mouth can say 1,000 words. I'll expand on all that in a bit, but first of all, I need to say that I love this woman, and I am so glad she is finally getting the widespread acclaim she oh so immensely deserves. I first watched her in this show called A to Z in 2014. Kristen had this quality to her that I was so drawn to, but since I was 12ish at the time, I didn't know where else to see her. So guess how I reacted a year or so later when I was watching a certain other rom-com for the first time, and it was revealed she was playing another, even more likable love interest. Flash forward a number of years later, where I continue to fall in love with her and other comedic performances, as well as her music with her beautiful covers of La Vie en Rose and 715 Creeks, and it was announced that she would be playing the daughter of the late crime lord Carmine Falcone in the spin-off series to the Batman, The Penguin. And here we are today. So now let's ask this question. How did Kristen's skill in acting transform from humorous moments to these in How I Met Your Mother?
What? Do I have stuff in my teeth?
Give me your engagement ring back.
Just because I have stuff in my teeth? We can work through this.
Just give it back.
I always cave and side with the other person. I can't handle confrontation.
Yes, you can.
You make some good points.
I'm a huge fan of your band, Super Freakonomics.
Oh my gosh, really?
That last girl, number 31.
Oh, that's a pretty name. What is that, French?
To being utterly horrified by her and the Penguin.
Your barrette's loose.
Oh, I can fix that.
I got it.
That I shouldn't take things so personally. Was it my brother's right or left pinky that you chopped off?
Range. It's called Range. But what makes her so terrifying, and how do we sympathize with her at the same time? The Penguin's fourth episode, Janani, almost exclusively focuses on Sofia as she transforms from an innocent, well, as innocent as a crime boss's daughter can be, mild-mannered philanthropist with good intentions, to a ruthless, sadistic dawn of the Falcone-turned-Gigante crime family. After Sofia begins questioning the quote-unquote suicide of her mother, Carmine takes notice, and with his power, with his money, frames his own daughter for murder as the hangman in order to hide his own violent tendencies against women, and she is sent to Arkham State Hospital. Over the course of a torturous 10 years, she is forced to eat slop, receive severe electroshock therapy, and be challenged and beaten by the other inmates because of the crime she did not commit. It absolutely breaks her soul and psyche to the point that she senselessly kills her next-door cell neighbor, and it breaks the heart of the audience to see someone with great potential devolve into such a shell of herself. With its uncomfortable, shaky close-ups and abrasive score to exhibit Sofia's spiral into madness, Janani is undeniably the best episode of the series, showcasing what this dehumanizing treatment does to a person, and that the renewal project from the Batman really could have helped so many if it wasn't dissolved by Carmine. Gotham is rooted in that much corruption that the people at the top of the pyramid aren't willing to give the wrongfully convicted a voice or the proper funding for mental health rehabilitation. Even influential but morally upright individuals like Bruce Wayne aren't yet aware of the help they could be giving. You see Sofia accept her fate when her brother Alberto breaks the news that she'll be staying far longer than they thought. Her stone-cold face vacant eyes, wry chuckle, how she exits the room in a daze, unblinking. After so many months of trying her damnedest to prove her innocence, she realizes there's no point anymore, and that's what leads her to mercilessly killing Magpie. Honestly, Alberto being the only family member who was there for her is perfect, since Carmine influence suggested them to write her off as an insane person. It explains why she was so desperate to know where he was in episode 1, and it gives her a great character motivation to kick off the series with, especially since this is, I can only assume, days after she was released from Arkham.
My brother visited me every week.
Yeah, Alberto was a bonehead, but he did truly care for Sofia, and knowing this while revisiting the scream that escapes from her makes it all the more blood-curdling. Now, I really want to explore the nuances in Kristen Miliotti's performance. In The Batman, I absolutely adore analyzing Robert Pattinson's micro-expressions, and I do the same for Sofia here. She has these large, expressive eyes that say so much without her having to speak a word. Whether she's wordly gazing at a family portrait, giving off a glassy, thousand-yard stare, furiously screaming at the sight of her dead brother, or finding solace while reading a letter from a familiar face, actors who can pull off stuff like that are my favorite actors. She stares at just about everyone as a potential target or simply subhuman, and is quite literally shooting daggers at whoever she's speaking to. There's great contrast between her posture and body language in the flashbacks and how we see her during the present day. She gives a speech at a charity luncheon honoring her late mother, and out of nervousness, she uses her hands while she's talking as they move about in spontaneous directions. She has to release her nerves in some way. She depends on the podium for physical support, since otherwise she wouldn't know where to put her hands. We've all had those situations where we're standing still and we don't know what to do with them, but putting them on our body, like crossing our arms or putting them behind our back, feels weird. I've been there. There's slight pauses in her speech pattern too, since she's making it up as she goes along. After all, she's
Never
not
been
really
one
one
for
for speeches.
speeches.
In general, you see the innocence in the eyes of pre-Arkham Sofia. For being in a patriarchal crime family, she only witnesses so much violence, but you can tell there's good in her. Her mother's death still affects her, but she really is putting in the effort to give girls and women the treatment they deserve. She's just a tad too socially awkward to execute it confidently. Compare that to the dinner scene near the end of the episode, after we witnessed everything she went through in Arkham. She again states she's not one for speeches, but she and us as the audience know damn well she wants to get some words off her chest. It's a perfect reflection of the luncheon scene, where now her verbal and body language has purpose. What she's saying has purpose, because she's been ruminating on it for a decade. She does pause throughout her speech, but it's for dramatic effect or to intimidate those around her. I absolutely love how Johnny Vitti tries to shut her down, and the only way Sofia shuts him up is with,
Yes?
especially since she and Oz have dirt on his affair. Ugh, it's amazing. She demands that Carla stays in her seat, but when she excuses Gia to start getting ready for bed, her face slightly softens because she knows she's the only virtuous family member, but it also now allows her to be unfiltered when speaking. Her hand gestures are dialed back, but they're now used to emphasize her points, such as when she lists off the victims her father killed or how she was stuffed into Arkham. And when they're at rest, she keeps them propped up on the table, a clear indicator of confidence in that whoever is speaking owns the space, much like what she does when speaking to her new family in the following episode. Her eyes are now laser focused on the people around her, the family members who have wronged her. Her gaze is piercing, and I never want to be on the receiving end of it. You also hear her voice ever so slightly quaver when she tells her family she loved them, since their betrayal still affects her after all these years.
I trusted you. I loved you.
What's also really interesting to note about the end of her speech is that she gives a toast and states the episode's namesake, Janani. It's a blessing in Italian, basically meaning, may you live a long life. Yeah. If this scene alone doesn't make Kristen an Emmy winner, I don't know what will. But even back in episode 1, the gazes Sofia gives off instantly captures her personality. There are so many instances of her micro-expressions I love appreciating. Her unconvinced when Oz says that Alberto is a busy man now, since Oz isn't aware that Alberto is willing to spare time for her. She even does this super tiny mouth twitch when the two of them are out at lunch and he's giving his alibi. Ugh, what a sensational woman. It's later stated she knows when people are lying through their teeth, so of course she would know Oz is making all this stuff up. One of my absolute favorite moments in the show is when she blinks and gives a small yet tight smile when she states,
No. I've been rehabilitated.
with her facial expression, it comes across as off-putting the first time you're watching it. Her blinks are practically the quotation marks surrounding the word rehabilitated. It's ironic, especially with how it's edited with the magpie scene in the trailer.
No. I've been rehabilitated.
But rewatching it after Janani, those quotation blinks have a new meaning, with Sofia playing into the slanderous narrative that has been built for her. Speaking of which, I want to explain why this makes her similar to... You guys aren't going to believe what I'm going to say. Megamind. Okay, hear me out, I'm serious about this. They're individuals who are outcast by their family and peers, and like I mentioned earlier, no matter how hard they try to convince them that they're good, they aren't given that chance, so they have no choice but to give into it. We see this with how Megamind sabotages his shul and fights with Metro Man time and time again, and how, again, Sofia kills Magpie, but also purposefully makes a scene at the dinner party by loudly moving her chair and filling her glass with wine up to the brim. And yes, Megamind has Roxanne to eventually lead him on the right path, but Sofia doesn't have someone like that. I mean, she has Dr. Rush, but he's very much into that creepy doctor-patient power dynamic, and she uses him as a pawn to her advantage. Men have had control over her entire life. Now she wants to do the same in return. Might as well have some fun while she's at it, I guess.
I'd like to be a part of whatever's next, if you'll have me.
Ugh, he's such a simp, I hate him. I see Sofia in another movie villain, this time one that is a lot more genuinely diabolical. Now tell me, what's the most you ever lost on a coin toss? I watched No Country for Old Men for the first time while writing this video, and I realized that Sofia shares some similarities with Anton Chigurh. They don't need fantastical theatrics or a maniacal laugh like the Joker to be terrifying, but the way they carry themselves and have the tendency to speak in a soft voice drive that point home. Just look at the way they're introduced. Out of focus in the background on the right side of the frame as they come closer, barely, if at all, making a sound. They know what they're capable of, which makes those around them and by extension the audience afraid of what they'll do. Now of course I'm not saying a villain as boisterous as the Joker is bad, but a subtle, subdued performance can be as, if not perhaps more terrifying, just like how a blink of an eye can say as much as a passionate monologue. And while the two will try to take every opportunity they can, they don't kill every person they come across. Anton famously spares the life of the gas stop owner since he called the correct side of the coin, and Sofia doesn't kill her niece Gia, Oz's mother Frances, or lady friend Eve, and that's where the line between the two of them is drawn. Anton leaves mercy up to chance as he's the personification of pure evil, and his killing spree is all a game to him, while Sofia genuinely empathizes with the few people she keeps alive. Despite the possibility of Gia ratting her out to the police for having gassed their family, Sofia sees herself in her since she's a little girl growing up in the mafia world, dealing with the loss of her mother and struggling to cope with that by harming herself, the same way she had done to herself.
Make sure you keep her protected. A young woman in this family might not end well for her.
Her having to step out to avoid Gia witnessing her having a panic attack truly is absolutely heartbreaking. Meanwhile, I really don't think she was actually planning to kill Frances for most of the time she's known her. Granted, it hasn't been a long time, but you know what I mean. Even though Sofia is furious at Oz for betraying her twice and states she wants him to make him feel the same pain she felt, killing his mother is her limit, especially when she witnesses her and Vic be more of a family for Oz than she ever had, and when she sees Frances go through an episode of dementia. Besides, she didn't wrong Sofia the same way Carla did. Since Oz was willing to have her blood on his hands, he's more of a monster than she is. She was already aware of part of this back in episode 1.
You are so good at talking your way out of things, even at the cost of someone else's life.
But she never could have thought it would go this far.
You would have let me cut it off. Huh. You would have let me do it. Because you don't care about her.
Not enough.
Anyway, gotta love her use of Chekhov's cigar cutter after she stole it from Oz's apartment in episode 6. She also keeps Eve alive after revealing to her that Oz kept the identity of the hangman away from her. The man he worked for killed her co-workers, whom she considers her friends and family. As a result, Eve's perception of Sofia unravels before her very eyes.
He said he felt bad for you, that you were sick. Well, if that were true, you would have been dead at the door.
This scene is filled to the brim with tension as we're totally convinced Sofia is going to kill her. The blocking is amazing as Sofia snakes about in Eve's apartment, prolonging what Eve, and we, think is the inevitable. Despite being perceived as the hangman by everyone, Sofia is really a victim of the monster that created her.
Victims are so quickly forgotten. Our stories are rarely told.
But let's skip ahead to the very end of the final episode. Oz abducts her and, for old time's sake, takes her out for a drive and leads her to the bridge where their two social statuses meet. Oz wants her to turn around and check out the pretty sunrise, if you get what I'm saying. And at this point, she doesn't have anything or anyone else. He killed her brother, Salvatore Moroni, and even all the rival gangs, so she doesn't see any worth in trying to defeat Oz anymore. In other words, she doesn't fear death. She welcomes it. And the thing is, Oz knows that. He states she's going to hell, and so she does. Instead of a bullet through the head, she's instead met with a bright searchlight from a helicopter, almost half a dozen cop cars, and Oz nowhere to be found. After mere weeks of being released, she's sent back to Arkham, a fate worse than death. Her reaction says it all. While waiting for this shot, she closes her eyes and lets out an exhale because, like her stay at Arkham, she accepts her fate, but this time is at peace with the fact. Once she turns around, it falls apart just as she pieces it together. You see it in her eyes. The realization, the dread, the agency that is being ripped away from her once again. We later see her back in the hospital and she's at her lowest point. She doesn't react to the door locking and unlocking, Dr. Rush coming in, him speaking to her about marriage proposals. His words are as distant as the freedom she once had, and her gaze shows that. She's become even more of a shell of her former self, that once shy but well-intentioned philanthropist. But something's different about this visit. She gets a letter from someone. Her half-sister, in fact. The one and only Selena Kyle. Sophia and Selena team up. Let's go! We don't know what was in the letter that gave Sophia a glimmer of hope despite everything she's gone through. So all we can do is wait for her next appearance. In the meantime, let's talk about that costume design. Much like Oz, Sophia goes through her own metamorphosis from being an underestimated figure to an unstoppable force in the crime world. Well, for a little bit. But it's reflected in that through her hair, makeup, and clothes. During the first 3 episodes, she wears a number of solid-colored coats, not just to keep herself warm from the incoming weather that is settling upon Gotham, but also to cover her scars, specifically on her neck and shoulder. I remember seeing the set photos when they started shooting, and I thought she looked amazing. But as she begins to embrace her Gigante namesake, the necklines begin to plunge, the colors become brighter, and the patterns become wilder since she's allowing her battle scars to proudly display and overall feels more liberated from the Falcone name. Meanwhile, she lets her hair down from the simple updos, shag to full-on mullet by the end. It was established in episode 2, but I think it's important to point out the use of fur and animal prints and how they play a bigger role later in the series. After it's revealed Oz killed her brother, she begins her desperate prowl to hunt him down, but does not hesitate to kill other prey along the way. It's very Mrs. Robinson-esque, with them both using their fashion to symbolize their predatory nature. I listened to Kristen's interview on the movie podcast, and she talked about how Sophia uses makeup and fashion strategically and weaponizes the materials that have been given to her, and it's genius.
With her makeup, that obviously goes on a real journey and became about like what is like the war paint this woman would put on. And this is the world she's from. She's from a world where the women can only express themselves through their makeup and their hair and their clothes, and that's like what they're expected to be concerned with and nothing else. And so you're like, how does someone who goes through what she goes through with the tools that she was given growing up, like how does that morph? The eyeliner that she wears in 4, like I wanted something that looked like almost like camouflage or something that like would also like made a sense of occasion out of that dinner.
Another detail I love is Sophia's appetite. Like I said, she ate slop in Arkham for 10 years, so now having the opportunity to eat quality food, she will take advantage of every instance. She and Oz go out to lunch and she stuffs her face with olives in episode 1, and she does so again in 8. She loves her olives, it's adorable. Then playing into the rumors that have been spread about her by literally digging into some pasta at her brother's wake in 2, and of course her topping it off by politely wiping her mouth. During that iconic dinner scene, she's even getting food out of her teeth during her monologue. Maybe it's so that she doesn't look like an idiot while going off on her family members, but I mean, they're Italian after all. They make a spicy meatball. In general, despite her rough and tough exterior and sympathetic moments, the show isn't afraid to give her funny moments.
And it has only made us stronger. But here, this house, us, we.
Yeah.
Tacky. I know. Tina, don't forget your panties.
Oh, Antonucci's. Oh, that doesn't look like it traveled well.
I also like how, as temporary as it is, she teams up with Salvatore Maroni as a way for her to further rebel against her father's wishes. It's a nice break from the constant feuding in the show that feels natural for Sophia's character. Sal prioritizes familial love compared to Carmine, and it's really great to see Sophia have a father figure in her life for once. The late-night dinner scene between the two of them is really sweet, and I've heard the showrunner Lauren LaFranc describe it as a dad making a grilled cheese sandwich for his daughter, and I couldn't say it better myself. It's also just nice to see 2 iconic actors share the screen. Man, Clancy Brown was so good in this. Not sure how I feel about his sudden heart attack, but whatever. And while Michael Giacchino unfortunately doesn't return to score the series, his son Mick Giacchino does a great job filling in those shoes. He describes the score as being a demented cousin to the soundtrack for the Batman, and you heard it with the Penguins theme, but also Sofia's with her motif that has a slight off-kilter discordance to it. And like his father, he's got the punny title tracks. Would you like to hear some of them? Pinking This Lane, Slammer Time, Driving Miss Crazy, Mother of Oz, Victory, Nose Goes, March of the Penguin, Squid Games, Scorn on the Cob, Arrested Development. Overall, yes, Sofia Gigante is a despicable character. But damn it, she's amazing at being one. And I'm just glad an alternate version of her happily married Ted. But, Ted, beware the crazy eyes. Like some of my other favorite female characters like Jinx and Azula, Sofia is a victim of an abusive father who did not give her the pure familial love she needed, nay, deserved. As such, her mental state spiraled to the point of no return, making her one of the finest of the sympathetic villain archetype. There's only so much theorizing and speculating I can do about what's next for her, so I guess I'll say to Lauren LaFranc, Matt Reeves, Kristen Milioti, and the rest of the cast and crew, congrats on a spectacular show. Rest in peace, Vic. And Oz, I can't wait to see Batman beat the crap out of you. As for part 2, I eagerly await the return of Robert Pattinson's beautiful face, and perhaps Kristen's, as well as hopefully Michael Giacchino's sensational score and Greg Fraser's captivating cinematography. In the meantime, if you the viewer are going to talk about Sofia Gigante, y'all better put some respect to her name. Sorry.
Name!
Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and join my Patreon, and I will see you later. Goodbye!